The Vikings and Falcons off seasons kind of went hand in hand this season, so how do we feel about either one? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to Locked On Vikings every single day. My hashtag every day, especially those of you who sat around while we were in slowdown mode for a few weeks. But we're back. It's Tuesday. It's Twitter Tuesday. Haven't had one of these in a while. Very excited. If you're new here, Twitter Tuesday is a Q&A episode we do every week, and you can find Locked On Vikings every day wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search it out on somewhere like SiriusXM, which, by the way, you can also get live radio broadcasts of, say, Timberwolves games. Just search out Timberwolves or whatever team you're trying to listen to. You can get hometown broadcasts there. You can also find this show by searching it out on YouTube or on Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase of last-minute tickets. Terms apply. Today is Twitter Tuesday. I'm so excited to actually have one again. I missed these more than I thought I would, I guess. If you want to get in on this, you can always send me a question via email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form, which will be in the show notes or YouTube description of any episode. You can also just send them to me on Twitter. I'll usually put out a call on Mondays. That'll fill it out. First question that I am going to answer today comes from Rob Meek, who asks, which QB situation do you like better, Vikings or Falcons? I tend to stray away from questions like this usually because I'm not here to start talking smack or whatever, but it does kind of make sense, right? Because it's like this is the Kirk Cousins and a rookie thing was a talking point for basically all of Kirk Cousins' time in Minnesota. And now the Falcons have it. So do we feel like we would rather have that or this? And the thing is, Cousins is the most expensive bridge quarterback ever, right? That's kind of what that turns him into. I hate where the Falcons are at. And a lot of that has to do with my personal opinion of those quarterbacks. If you love Kirk Cousins and you loved Penix, you're going to have a different opinion than me. And that's totally fair. But I have been talked plenty about how I feel about Kirk Cousins in terms of his ability to win a Super Bowl. He might be able to get him to the playoffs and win the division, but I don't think he can string together enough games to go on a run or to be like a true, contending, really elite team. And we saw that here too, right? Like we saw a lot of good, not great. And I'm just not a big fan of Penix as the next guy. But hey, with 2 years for him to develop, maybe he gets rid of some of the hitches in his giddy up that I didn't like. It's difficult because he's been a college quarterback for 5 years. Why hasn't that happened yet? What's going to be different about years 6 and 7, right? Do the Falcons truly have the secret special sauce to developing that quarterback? There's all kinds of questions. I actually went on Locked On Falcons. I think yesterday would have been the day it aired, and actually had a long conversation about this with Aaron Freeman over there. So you can actually go listen to that for more. But I like where the Vikings are at. I mean, right now, the Falcons are going to be a better team than the Vikings easily. Of course, right? Kirk Cousins way better QB than Sam Darnold, and JJ McCarthy probably won't even be playing until the season might be out of reach. So yeah, right now the Falcons are better than the Vikings. But there is a vision, right? There's a long-term plan and you can see it. And it's not, the nebulous long-term plan of get a draft pick and do something with it. No, we've got our guy and we've got our kind of path that we're on. And I feel pretty good about that path. Mario asks, I am wondering what to expect with McCarthy's arm, especially in reference to how far and hard he can throw the ball. I paraphrased you there, Mario. He sent a much longer thing. I did read it. So you're looking at arm strength in particular, and arm strength, how far you can throw the ball is not really so much a question of arm strength as it is one of accuracy and touch. Because once you get past 20 yards, you're basically never going to zip line them, right? You've got to put air under that thing. And that becomes more of a touch thing. There's it's a different throwing motion that JJ McCarthy, as of college, doesn't really have. And I think that's the biggest thing they're working on with him right now. So that's going to be the thing to watch. Can he throw those touchy passes, float one over a cornerback, over a flat cornerback or something like that? But in terms of the zip, when he's just got to rifle one in there, it's kind of all he does. That is his throw. Like that rifle, especially from the far hash, which wider hashes in college. So those are really, really difficult passes. He trusted his arm a lot. And there are a lot of really good plays where he just like knifes one in there with a D-back like coming down on it really, really hard. Like that arm strength thing is like the key to him. I think that's like the point of him, is that he can rifle those and really have access to, every blade of grass. It's just, getting him deep is a different skill. Scott Graham asks, is Sam Darnold closer to Sean Mannion, conservative and boring, or Nick Mullins, aggressive and volatile? Curious how entering the first weeks of the season will be. So over his career, he's very much been more like Mullins, but it's not even really aggressive and volatile. It's just kind of volatile. Like the reason he didn't work out in New York was, look, he was 20 years old when he got drafted. He was all the talent in the world, and he was thrown into the fire too quickly and fell apart. Like that's what happened, right? And it was all a lot of mental processing. You might remember the infamous like seeing ghosts thing. He just made a lot of mistakes. It was just a lot of inconsistencies, and it made it so he just could not be your franchise quarterback anymore. I think as he has gotten older, he's chilled that out a little bit, and he's getting a little bit closer to the Sean Mannion thing. But Sean Mannion was such an extreme on that spectrum where it was never going to be, because he had like an arm strength issue. So he didn't have access to the full field. You kind of had to just be like a point guard playing West Coast, Mickey Mouse nonsense, and be like the Carolina Panthers last year. It would just never work as an offense. So I don't think he falls on like either end of that spectrum, but I would say he was much closer to this is weird, but sometimes he makes awesome throws. And as he's gotten older, he's sort of moving toward the Sean Mannion end of that spectrum, as a lot of veterans and backups do. They chill out, they realize what they can and can't get away with, they get a little bit more efficient, a little bit less aggressive, a little bit less explosive, but safer, and you can make a career in the league being safe. Mason asks, I'm hearing questions on other podcasts about how many games the Vikings need to lose before they put JJ in. Do you think there's any chance the record will sway Kevin O'Connor, or do you think they're sticking to not playing him even if we're losing a lot? Isn't that the question, right? Like, I get why that's talker on every Vikings podcast. In an ideal world, you don't care, right? You're in when you're ready. And yeah, man, we're 0-7. We're not going to save the season by putting you in. So let's just do what is best for you, right? Like that's the ideal world, but the pressure gets to you. You're sitting there, maybe you're 1-4 at the bye week. It's a pretty tough stretch before the bye week, and you're going, man, what if he's the spark we need, right? What if this is hey, are you ready? And he's going to say, I'm ready, coach. Yeah, put me in. I'm good to go, because he's a gung-ho kid. Is he ready? Or, are you going to get blinders to it? And he's insisting he's ready. And you say, all right, you say you're ready. Let's put you in. But then it really is too, like that happens a lot. You know who that happened with, in my opinion? Christian Ponder. That's like the fear. That's why I have this like weird fear about like, what if they lose too much early and get so much pressure that they're just going to say like, all right, let's put the kid in and see if he gives them a spark. Christian Ponder was not ready to go in, and he did. And things maybe could have been different if he had a little bit more time to kind of especially get used to like pressure in the pocket. He got that Panic Ponder nickname. Maybe things could have turned out. Maybe he could have developed into a different quarterback. Wow, Vikings had a good first round. Says, am I the only one who doesn't care at all about what we gave up to get Dallas Turner? So this is a facet of gathering questions for like a month. I think this one was put in like 2 days after the draft, because clearly nobody's talking about this anymore, right? Which I think speaks to your point. Yeah. I said what I feel about it. Yeah, it was the value was not proper, but you got a pretty good player, so you're probably happy with it anyways. Cam Xstorm asks, my theory is because of older COVID prospects and NIL money diluting the talent in rounds 3 to 7 that Kwesi doesn't value mid-round picks as much and is more willing to trade them for established players in early round studs. Is this Cope, or am I on to something? It's probably Cope. In 2022, he stacked in rounds 2 and 3, like in that particular place in the draft. It might be how he felt about this class in particular, but I think he just kind of thought it was worth it. He just said, yeah, I'll give up to a 2 and a 3. Yeah, we'll get Dallas Turner. Yep, let's do it. It's worth it. Like I don't think he sees that as a negligible cost, just a cost that's worth it. Okay, I've got a few more questions, and then we're going to get into some of the silly stuff. And yes, there's some Wolves talking here, so get excited for that, I guess. I'm sure most of you don't mind. Let's keep it going. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets to perhaps a basketball game that until last night you didn't know was going to happen. Maybe are any of you in that situation? So if you want to go see a Wolves conference finals game, or you can even go for tickets to Vikings games if you're starting to plan like a London trip for the Jets game, or you want to see their home opener against San Francisco, or the annual late December Packers game. That's always a fun one. You can find all of that at Gametime. Gametime's specialty, though, is last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% for buying last minutes for sporting events, but also concerts, theater, whatever you're deciding to go to this weekend. You can just spontaneously be like, hey, let's go to a thing and see if Gametime has a ticket at a great deal. Because once you get pretty close to the event, you can even buy tickets up to an hour into the event. People are just trying to get rid of their tickets, and you might be able to get a really good deal there. Gametime will pass the savings on to you. And you will get the lowest price. That's the Gametime guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same section and row somewhere else for less. They'll make sure that they do right by you. That's what I like about Gametime. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, and I'm assuming you're going to go listen to Locked On Timberwolves, you probably have to, but when you're done with those, you can go to the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel, find the 24/7 streaming channel that'll have all things Minnesota sports looping all day long. Moving on here with the mailbag, the next one comes from Gas Station Hot Food Guy, who asks, you're onto something, by the way, Gas Station Hot Food Guy. That's I see the vision. He says, with the lack of draft capital in 2025, I know it's super early, and projected cap room, how do you think the Vikings brass will navigate future assets or most likely outcome? You can't answer this question. I could throw out a guess, but it would be arbitrary. I guess the speculation that I would have is that they probably have some kind of plan earmarking certain resources for stuff that has a lot to do with how they feel about the upcoming classes. Not necessarily the resources that they have, but like, is this a good O-line class? Is this a good D-line class? What about the free agents we expect to come out, right? And a lot of that is informed just by what contracts are expiring, by, the rumor mill of what situations, is that team going to re-sign that guy and all that stuff. And then you can start to make decisions like, yeah, well, there's going to be a bunch of really good free agent D-linemen. Let's earmark a lot of money let's be really aggressive, or let's plan to be really aggressive in 2025 at D-line in free agency, right? Just like they were really aggressive at defensive end this year. They got 3 guys that are meant to be starters in Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Turner. So maybe they do the same thing with D-line next year, and that's kind of the way they do that. And they usually, this is when Kwesi says time horizon, this is what he's talking about. That it's like there's this year, but there's also next year and the year after. How do we, leverage what we're going to be able to have access to in those years the best we can? So there is a plan for that, but who knows what it is, right? And also lots of stuff about that changes. So you have to have that plan be really flexible for when that team does re-sign that player and you didn't think he was, when stuff happens, like Devontae Parker retires and now the Patriots are, and the Eagles are in, or it would have been the Eagles. Now the Eagles need a wide receiver more than they used to, like that kind of stuff. Where in the world is Brian Asamoah asks, seriously, what happened? He was an anointed starter last training camp who lost his job to Pace Hicks and Troy Dye. This year we signed Cashman and bring in more linebackers. Is he on track to becoming a cut-down casualty this year? Man, I must have just been super wrong. Like, I looked at him in training camp and he was killing it. He was playing phenomenally in training camp just last year. And Ivan Pace was also playing phenomenally. And it was like, okay, well, iron sharpens iron. These 2 guys are in a great competition. They're probably going to be the guys. With Jordan Hicks obviously also being the guy. I think this is a camp question now. He goes into camp with this kind of are you going to keep your job kind of deal. Pretty rare for second year, third rounders to get cut. You need to be kind of in like a we just changed GM's situation, which is sort of factored into all those 2021 guys getting cut. Also, they all sucked really bad, but they all sucked way worse than Asamoah sucks. I'll say that. Like Chaz Surratt, Wyatt Davis, and Kellen Mond all very much were worse picks than Asamoah was. Like Asamoah already gotten on the field some and played well, but in terms of what he needs, I'm going to say tackling is the deal, especially as a smaller guy. You just need to become a better tackler. Somebody else asked about like, what's the deal with Lewisine? That's going to be my answer to that question all offseason. Tackle. He failed a couple of tackles in the preseason last year. I think that kept him off the field. He needs to be a better tackler. He needs to come in with more sand in his pants when he tackles, and he needs to be able to wrap up a little bit better. You can't get bowled over in the preseason again. Sloth asks, taking a look at the 49ers Our Lads, Dobbs is undisputed QB2. McGill is third string with an undrafted free agent on his heels. Mullins for TY straight up. Who says no? That's a really interesting idea of trading Mullins back to the 49ers. I kind of like that idea, assuming that they agree that, you know, they would rather have Mullins than Dobbs, which is the decision the Vikings ultimately made. But they might not agree with that, right? Like it's a different Josh Dobbs because he gets the camp. So I'm going to guess that they're just like chilling with Josh Dobbs and they view him as a pretty good backup. But the idea of trading Mullins, you probably aren't getting like a player unless it's a player that somebody else is like already going to cut, in which case you don't really need to trade Nick Mullins for that. You can do like a 2028 sixth for a seventh or whatever, or 2027 sixth for a seventh. Like who cares kind of trade. So I think the 49ers do say no to that. They probably just like Josh Dobbs more than we do because they expect him to do better when he has a camp, which is fair. Skull Analytics asks, how often, if at all, can we expect to see Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Turner on the field at the same time? So the easy answer here is on third downs, on like passing situations. They have done, Flores has done 4 edge rushers. So you get like Patrick Jones in there as well. And you just don't have any big nose tackles because what's he going to do on 3rd and 12, right? Push the pocket, defend the run. Like this is going to be like a game of grass, right? So then for sure, but there are also probably like faster packages that you want. Against mobile QBs, you might see that a lot more, which also Patrick Jones is kind of specializes in, you know, read option and, you know, kind of squeezing that backside. That was always the thing for him. But I do think that having like that rotation and being able to give all of them snaps off to keep them fresh is really good. That's like really important. So don't freak out if you don't get every single snap out of every single guy. You don't want to max efficiency like that much. Ryan asks, with Williams being cut, Joanne Williams, I assume you mean, is that maybe a sign that the team has confidence in either of Booth or Evans? Maybe, although I think you just kind of replace Joanne Williams with Shaq Griffin as your like formerly starting quarterback, kind of now a journeyman veteran coming in to give competition to the young guys. I think that's more about Shaq Griffin than it is about Booth or Evans, but I could definitely be wrong there. I'm super just kind of out on a ledge speculating. Tundra Viking says, I'm curious about the rules that limit official offseason training team training sessions and how teams and players work within them to ensure players have the most productive offseason they can. How do players know what specifically they need to work on and who they work with to coach them properly? That's a really interesting question. So as far as I know, the way that you usually approach this, so there are a lot of regulations and restrictions on how much a team can work with the player. And that's a union thing. That's like a labor thing. That's like not only is it about like protecting your body and you know, even a practice in shells or a practice in shorts still takes a lot out of your body. So it's partially about rest and taking care of that and letting the offseason be a true rest period for everyone's bodies who just got bruised up all season. But it's also just kind of about like, it's a labor thing. It's a, you know, you're my employer and you can't just like ask me to come in every single day. I have a life. So those restrictions exist for like those reasons. And outside of that, it is entirely up to the players what they do. And if they want to sit down and play video games, they are like perfectly allowed to do that within the contract. If you show up to camp out of shape, you might be in a little bit of trouble. But most players will go to either work out with each other. That's why you'll see, you know, like a bunch of wide receivers work out, or like all the tight ends work out together. Hawkinson and Kittle and Kelsey all like work out together. or they'll work with specialists on something in particular if they're looking to like gain weight, right? Like they'll go spend a lot of time with a nutritionist and in the weight room and all that stuff. I believe they're allowed to use the facilities as much as they want, but they can't be like required to come. And then you get to stuff like OTAs, which are starting today, I think. Or no, they started Monday. They started yesterday. We already had one. Justin Jefferson didn't show up, by the way, as expected. Nothing to worry about there. That's absolutely what he should do when he's in the middle of a contract negotiation. But you can't require it, right? You cannot. There can be no punitive action against Justin Jefferson for not showing up to OTAs. The Vikings wouldn't, but that's not an option. You're not allowed to do that. You get in a lot of trouble until you get to mandatory stuff. So the short answer is it's up to the players. The players have to do it. Maybe a coach can say, "Hey, I think you should really work on this aspect of your footwork," and it's now up to the player whether he does or doesn't do that. So usually, I mean, you'll listen, right? But it's his decision. Okay, I've got some less serious questions coming up, so get excited for that. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's the best place to go gamble on, say, the Western Conference Finals in the NBA. You think it's Wolves in 4? Go bet on it. You mean you just want to bet on the Wolves in general? Go bet on it. You want to bet on the Mavs just in case? Go with God. I see you. You can also bet on a lot of NFL futures, division stuff, MVP, Rookie of the Year, that kind of stuff. You can find it all. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So go pick a heavy favorite in some sport. Go put $5 down. You can get $150 back, 30-1 on a $5 bet. You won't find those odds anywhere else. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started with that and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Moving along with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, Charles tells me to rate the draft pick jersey number auras 1 through 10. Okay, I've got to look this up. So I guess starting with JJ McCarthy, he's number 9. That's his college number. Both he and Dallas Turner are college number people. Dallas Turner's wearing number 15. Very good. We love that. We're already familiar with them in that number. We don't have to get used to something new. So even if there are 9 as a quarterback number, I don't know. They're like Tony Romo made it work, right? Guys have made it work for sure. So it's a fine number, but I think it does get a few extra points because he's already he won a championship in it, right? Like we've got pictures of him wearing 9 and being that guy. And same with Dallas Turner in 15. Even though it's weird to see, a little weird still for me to see edge rushers in numbers in the teens. I'm getting used to it. As a college player, we're already used to seeing Dallas Turner in that. So that's at least an 8 out of 10. Easy, very easy decision if you can get the number. There's Kyrie Jackson, who's wearing number 31. He is vocally not happy with the number that he got. He's already said, don't buy a jersey. I'm going to switch it when I can. So I'm sure he's waiting for whoever to get cut, right? And then maybe he'll switch his number afterwards. So already, immediately the vibe of 31 for him. 31 on a tall corner is pretty good vibes. But if he doesn't like it, it can't be a good vibe. It's got to be a 3 out of 10. Will Reichard, 46 is a kicker. Both the kickers have numbers. I think 96 is the other. The XFL kickers, 96. What on earth is that? 1 out of 10. What is that? Get out of here. 46 on a kicker. Come on now. Be serious. It works to me if you're huge. If you want to wear a number in the 90s, you got to be a big, bulky, thicker, not a kicker. Levi Drake Rodriguez is wearing number 50. That's a pretty bad vibe for a big nose with long hair can work at number 50. It gives you a Vita Vea vibe, and he is large, physically large. So I guess that can, I'll give it to him. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I guess I can respect it. I guess it can work. And then you've got the offensive lineman. You have Walter Rouse wearing 78. Classic. Very good. Love it. 9 out of 10. And Michael Juergens, interior O-line wearing 65. Again, classic. Love it. 8, 9 out of 10. Easy peasy. Next question comes from Caleb Osagi, who says, in your opinion, which QBs in the NFL have the coolest aesthetic/aura, and why does JJ McCarthy flex so hard on the rest of his class in that regard with the eye black, the sleeves, the tight sleeves? So that eye black is not exclusive to JJ McCarthy. A lot of kids do that. A lot of younger players will do that. You're going to see that coming into the NFL a lot more. The aesthetic's okay. The smiley face thing I think is very cute. Go listen to a recent episode for what the deal is with that. I think the best aesthetic in the NFL is Lamar Jackson. He's just, especially like visor Lamar Jackson, absolutely rocks. I love a one sleeve QB. JJ McCarthy has rocked that in the past. We can have a lot of fun with that. Otherwise, it's hard for me to come up with like aesthetics on the spot. But there's like a pretty 1-to-1 correlation between like your aesthetic and like your off the field like swagger, which some of these quarterbacks have and some of these absolutely do not. Bradley says, what process do you do to find the information about player stories during the summer? Get really good at Google News. That's if you want to look up that kind of stuff, especially looking in previous years. If you Google a player, if you just look up JJ McCarthy, everything you will find will be articles about him being drafted, maybe draft profiles, maybe, blank stat pages that have been made that are like ESPN stat pages that have like 0 games on them because he hasn't started any yet. So you'll find a lot of current stuff. But if you cut it off and if you use Google's like advanced search to say, things written about JJ McCarthy like 2022 and before, you're going to find more kind of breathless think pieces that give you a sense for like character. And so it's a lot of just amalgamating that. And then it's just me putting together a story and trying to kind of flex that muscle as well. Purple and Gold Hero asks, it's old now, but in the spirit of the rap beef battle, who would the Vikings make a diss song about and who would diss them back? Please don't say they would have to diss themselves. IMO Saints or Falcons. Certainly wouldn't be the Falcons. The Vikings and Falcons fan base is very good friends now. Especially now with like this Kirk Cousins connection. I've been on Locked On Falcons like 3 times talking about Kirk Cousins. So I don't think it can be the Falcons. Like that's very much water under the bridge. And the 98 thing, while, it sucked to lose to them, there was no bad blood after it. Like it was very like hats off, Falcons, you won. This sucks. We're very upset, but we're not upset at the Falcons or anything. Good job. You won the game. Congratulations. With the Saints, there was like all this bad blood, right? So it would probably be the Saints. If it were anybody, it could be the Jets, low key. The Vikings and Jets have had weird little moments of, sniping each other for players or whatever. Obviously, when Kirk Cousins chose the Vikings over the Jets, even though the Jets offered more money, there was some interesting stuff there, right? The Jets also put out a video of Joe Douglas trading down with Kwesi in the JJ McCarthy trade, trading down 1 pick and being like, it's free money, getting all excited and stuff. That kind of read, if you really wanted to read into it, you could say that it was a little bit of like smack talk, but Kwesi was obviously very jazzed on that as well. Said, I'll buy you a bottle of tequila. Let's do it again sometime. Right. So it could be that, but honestly, the answer isn't the Saints. It's Sean Payton. Sean Payton hates the Vikings, hates Vikings fans. It's very clear. It rocks. It's absolutely the rivalry you would have. MN Sports Appreciator says, give me a 20-second review of the favorite part of your trip. So the best part was probably the wildlife. I'm just going to say that generally. We did, so my honeymoon was a beach trip to Tahiti, which was very fun. And then afterwards, we were already halfway to Australia. So we went to Australia and sort of did a bunch of like wildlife experiences and stuff. The best one was definitely feeding a red panda. Very cool stuff. But also saw the Great Barrier Reef, got to feed some kangaroos. Very cool Australian things. Hiort asks, so we've gotten to the Wolves portion of the show, just for anybody who doesn't care about any of this. But I mean, the excitement in Minnesota is so palpable. I think it's appropriate for us to take a quick dive. Hiort asks, if the Wolves go all the way, does that mean the curse is broken and we become good? Or does it have the opposite effect of sending us into a tail-spinning hellhole of infinite 2-15 seasons? If the Washington market is anything, it's good. Because it's like the Caps won, and then the Nationals won, and then like the Commanders had a run around there. Like it can cascade, and I do think that it takes a little bit of the pressure off, right? You no longer have the hopes and dreams of every Minnesota sports fan. Now it's if the Wolves can do it, we can do it. It makes you feel less cursed, and that can get in your head a little bit less. At least that's the way that it reads to me. But obviously everybody has their own relationship with superstition. If Anthony Blake asks, if Anthony Edwards was on the Viking, what position would he play? Somebody asked this with Rudy Gobert as well. The answer for any basketball player is always going to be tight end. You're big, you're tall, you're fast, but not, perimeter fast. You've got long arms for blocking. You're a tight end. Easy peasy. And that's why a lot of tight ends did play basketball. If you played basketball and football at the same time, tight end is a position that you're almost certainly always going to end up as. Shadow asks, is JJ McCarthy's winning nature why the Timberwolves and Twins for a little while are winning since we finally have a winner in Minnesota? True. Gotta get a natural born winner that has literally only won ever for his entire career, going all the way back to high school. 3 football games he has lost since youth football. 3. All of high school, all of college. 3. Crazy. And finally, Skull Squatch asks, Naz Reid. Tomorrow, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but we'll figure out something. We'll see. We'll maybe talk a little bit about what's going on at OTAs as well. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.